Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling some really big questions, aren't we?
Absolutely, the kind that keep you up at night.
Exactly. Like what's truly real? Where did, everything come from? And maybe what does it all mean for us?
Yeah, fundamental stuff. And we're going to be exploring this using some ancient Vedic perspectives. We've got insights from a talk by Acharya Agnivrat Nishikik.
Right, focusing on how this tradition viewed the universe's origins.
We'll be digging into their ideas about reality versus illusion, sat, and asat, they call it.
Okay.
And the fundamental forces, maybe more than we think. Also the concept of Om, not just a sound, but something, well, much deeper.
And humanity's place in all this, our role, our responsibilities.
Definitely. And importantly, a critique of the sort of human-centric way we often view the world.
Okay, great. So our mission here is to really unpack these ideas, see how they stack up against maybe modern scientific views, and think about what they might offer, to our own understanding.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Let's start right at the beginning with that core Vedic idea. Sat and asat. What's the deal there?
Okay, so this is really foundational. Sat basically means what's truly real. Like internal, unchanging, exists outside of time.
The permanent stuff.
Exactly. And then asat is the opposite. The unreal, the temporary, what changes, maybe even illusory. Things that don't have that lasting, independent existence.
So it's like there's a permanent reality hidden behind all the change we see.
That's the core idea, yes. It challenges our common sense notion that only what we can, touch and see right now is truly real. It suggests something deeper, something constant underneath it all.
It makes me think of that line from the Bhagavad Gita, something like, the unreal never comes into being, and the real never ceases to be.
That captures it perfectly. It's profound because our whole experience is change, right? Things appear, they disappear.
Yeah.
This view suggests that maybe what we think of as solid reality is more like flickering images on a permanent screen.
Interesting. How does that compare to, say, modern science? Science is all about the observable, the measurable.
Right, and science is incredibly powerful at explaining that world, the phenomenal world. Scientists definitely think about origins, of course, but the main focus isn't usually on finding some single, unchanging, eternal sat.
It's more about the processes, the interactions within the universe as we see it now.
Precisely. The methodology is geared towards the empirical, the testable. An underlying, unchanging metaphysical reality isn't typically part of the standard model, so to speak.
Okay. Let's shift gears a bit then. What about fundamental forces? Science gives us 4.
Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces, yeah, that's the standard picture.
But the Vedic view hints at more.
It does. It raises this intriguing possibility. Some texts suggest 9, maybe even more, fundamental forces or fields.
9? Wow. Where would they be?
Well, the idea is they might operate on much subtler levels that our current instruments just aren't designed to detect or interact with.
So a deeper layer of cosmic machinery, maybe.
You can put it that way. A more intricate web of influences than we currently map out.
And this ties into particles too, right? Like we think of a photon as fundamental, basic unit of light.
Yeah, indivisible, right? But the Vedic perspective offers a different take.
How so?
It suggests that even things like photons might actually be composite,
built
up from something even more fundamental.
Like made of smaller things?
Sort of. Imagine countless underlying vibrations, or rays, they call them rashmi. These rashmi are seen as emanating from a primordial source, and particles like photons are like structured patterns or condensations of these rays.
Rashmi, like fundamental energy ripples.
That's a decent analogy, yeah. But originating from one ultimate source, it paints a picture of reality built from these incredibly fine layers of vibration.
Which leads us straight to Om. This isn't just a chant.
Oh, far from it. In this view, Om is that primordial vibration. It's the seed sound, the origin point from which all other sounds, all energy, all forms, everything arises.
The source code, almost.
In a way, yeah. It's said to encompass all of time, past, present, future. It's the continuous underlying hum of existence.
And it's called the eldest Brahman.
Yes, signifying that ultimate, unchanging reality. Something worthy of deep reverence, because it is the foundation.
Okay, that's vast. Let's bring it down to earth a bit. Humanity's role in this cosmic picture. The Vedic view seems to give us a pretty significant position.
It often does. Humans are seen as, well, potentially the highest form of life on this planet, mainly because of our capacity for reflective thought, for discernment.
Intelligence.
Yes, but true humanity here isn't just about being clever. It's defined by the ability to discriminate, to tell the difference between sat and asat, truth and untruth, and also between dharma and dharma, right action and wrong action.
And to act on that understanding.
Crucially, yes, to act in accordance with truth and righteousness.
So this intelligence comes with a big responsibility, especially towards the earth and other beings.
Exactly. A unique responsibility because of that unique capacity.
Yeah.
But here's the paradox the talk points out.
What's that?
That despite having this advanced intelligence, this amazing science, we seem to be creating huge problems for ourselves. Self-inflicted crises.
Okay, yeah. Like what?
Well, the talk critiques the anthropocentric worldview quite strongly. This idea that humans are the masters, that the earth is just here for us to use.
That everything revolves around us.
Right. And that mindset, the talk argues, leads directly to exploiting resources, damaging the environment, disregarding other life forms.
You can see that playing out.
And it's counterintuitive, isn't it? All this progress, science, technology, aimed at improving well-being. But we see rising pollution, maybe more intense natural disasters linked to climate change, ongoing conflicts, new diseases popping up.
And a lot of anxiety, even with material wealth.
Exactly. Existential angst seems pretty widespread.
Yeah.
It makes you question whether the progress we're making is actually leading us towards genuine well-being, or if we've maybe taken a wrong turn somewhere.
The talk uses an analogy here, right? Something about a vehicle.
Yeah, it's a good one. Imagine someone gives you the keys to an incredibly powerful, super sophisticated car.
Okay.
But you don't really know how all the systems work. You're not a trained driver, and you don't know the rules of the road.
Recipe for disaster.
Pretty much. The more powerful the car, our science and technology, the greater the potential for a serious crash if you're operating it without full knowledge, skill, and, importantly, ethical understanding.
So we're driving this powerful science vehicle without really understanding the roadmap or the traffic laws of the universe.
That's the analogy, yeah. We're manipulating creation, trying to control it, maybe, without a truly holistic grasp of how it all fits together, its underlying principles, or the potential consequences of our actions.
Which connects to the limits of science in explaining the ultimate why and how. The Big Bang, for instance.
Right. The Big Bang describes the expansion from an incredibly hot, dense state. But it doesn't really tell us what came before that state or what caused the bang in the first place.
Those origin questions remain.
They do. What was the initial state? What are the truly fundamental building blocks? The talk argues that if you don't understand the foundation, your understanding of everything built on top of it is necessarily incomplete, potentially even flawed.
Like trying to understand a novel by starting halfway through.
Something like that. You miss the setup, the core themes.
Yeah.
And the danger, as pointed out, is dismissing those fundamental origin questions just because our current tech can't probe them directly. That's seen as a potential blind spot.
And not knowing the origin, or maybe denying one, can lead to this feeling of unwarranted autonomy, like we're in charge.
Yeah, if you don't acknowledge a source or a higher organizing principle, it's easy to fall into thinking humans are the pinnacle, the ultimate authority, accountable to nothing higher.
Like students when the teacher leaves the room?
Yeah, maybe a bit like that, yeah. Without a sense of being part of a larger order with inherent laws and responsibilities, the drive can become just, unrestrained exploitation, competition, consumption, without enough thought for the planet, for other species, for the long term.
Leading to the ecological crises and extinctions we're seeing.
That's the suggested link.
So if that's the problem, what's the Vedic path towards correction, a more holistic approach?
Exactly. It calls for a science, or maybe an understanding, that integrates inner wisdom insights from contemplation, from understanding consciousness alongside empirical observation. It acknowledges that reality might have aspects beyond what our physical senses and instruments can currently measure.
Like this concept of prakriti.
Yes, prakriti. It's described as the primordial material cause, the fundamental potential from which everything manifests. It's said to have inherent qualities or properties. Some texts mention 30.
30. Way more than we usually think about.
Potentially. And maybe these are properties we can't detect yet, or maybe they're accessible through, say, deep meditation rather than a particle accelerator.
And this prakriti, in its raw state, is inert.
That's key. It's described as inert. No sound, no charge, no mass, no motion in its potential state. It just is.
Which means something else must be needed to get the universe going, to start the motion, the creation.
Precisely. If the raw material is inert, you need an initiator, a conscious force. The talk emphasizes that motion isn't seen as fundamental or eternal in itself. It requires a conscious impulse, something with intention and direction.
Like building something complex requires a builder, not just random bricks falling together.
That's the idea. Think about forming complex molecules, let alone life. It suggests an ordering principle and intelligence guiding the process, not just random chance operating on inert matter.
So there's Prakriti, the material, and then this conscious source.
Yes, Ishvara, often translated as God, or the supreme conscious entity, distinct from Prakriti, described as formless, omnipresent, the source of all energy, all force that acts on Prakriti.
And Om comes back here.
As the very first ripple, the first vibration initiated by consciousness within Prakriti, the spark that starts the unfolding.
And then things emerge in sequence. You mentioned space itself isn't just emptiness.
Right, Akasha, or Vyom space, is seen as a subtle substance with properties. It can curve, it can potentially expand. It's part of the sequence.
What is that sequence, broadly?
Okay, so the model generally goes Prakriti, the primordial nature. Then emerges Mahat, cosmic intelligence. Then Ahamkara, the ego principle or sense of I-ness. Then the Tanmatras, subtle elements or potentials for sense perception. Then mind stuff, life force elements, those rhythmic rays or Rashmi we mentioned.
Okay.
Then Akasha Vyom, space. And finally, the gross elements and particles that make up the physical world we experience.
That's quite a detailed unfolding. Very different from starting with a singularity or just assuming particles exist.
It's a different paradigm, definitely. Starting from potentiality and consciousness, unfolding step by step.
So we have these three key elements: Ishvara, the conscious source; Jiva, the individual soul or conscious experiencer; and Prakriti, the material cause.
Correct. Those are the three eternal categories often discussed.
And the argument is that science, by focusing almost entirely on Prakriti, the material, is missing a huge part of the picture.
That's the core critique presented. By leaving out Ishvara and Jiva, the conscious source and the conscious experiencer, you end up with an incomplete, potentially distorted view. And that, it's argued, leads to that ethical and existential vacuum we talked about.
Because if you bring back consciousness, a higher intelligence,
then you reintroduce concepts like purpose, meaning, accountability. It shifts the perspective from humans mastering a random universe to humans participating within a meaningful cosmic order, an order governed by laws like dharma, natural and ethical law, and karma, cause and effect.
which completely reframes the science versus religion thing.
It really does. Because religion here, or dharma, isn't about blind faith and dogma. It's about understanding and living in accordance with these universal laws, laws that govern both the physical and the conscious aspects of reality.
So physical science studies the material laws, and perhaps spiritual science studies the conscious or subtler laws.
Exactly. They become complementary investigations into the same underlying reality. The conflict only really arises from dogmatism, either rigid materialism that denies anything beyond matter, or rigid religious belief that rejects reason and evidence.
True dharma and true science both need logic, inquiry.
And even experiential validation, whether through experiments or practices like meditation. It's interesting how many great scientists actually express a sense of awe, a feeling of underlying intelligence or order in the universe. They might not call it Ishvara, but the sentiment is there.
So, given all this, what's the suggested path forward? How do we bridge this gap?
Well, the talk suggests, for scientists, cultivating a certain humility, being open to the limits of current models, engaging with philosophy, with contemplative traditions that have spent millennia exploring consciousness.
Not just dismissing things because we can't measure them yet.
Right. That dismissal is seen as potentially unscientific in itself. Recognizing the vastness of what we don't know is key. Humility about our own intelligence and technology.
And for religious or spiritual communities.
The encouragement is to move beyond unquestioning dogma, to embrace rational inquiry, to engage seriously with what physical science has established. True spirituality, it argues, needs to understand both consciousness and the cosmos.
It's about integrating, not separating.
Yes. And the practical results of that integration could be huge.
How so?
Imagine science informed by a deep ethical framework, prioritizing universal well-being. Sarvopakara is the term used. Technology developed not just because we can, but with careful consideration for ecological harmony and our psychological, even spiritual health.
A more conscious approach to progress.
Exactly. Really understanding interconnectedness, maybe even acknowledging that our collective thoughts and emotions could have a tangible impact.
And personally, this understanding could help with that existential angst.
Potentially, yes. Feeling part of a purposeful, intelligent universe rather than adrift in a meaningless void could fundamentally change our experience of life. The suggestion is that maybe our global crises stem, at least partly, from this fragmented worldview we operate under.
So it's calling for a paradigm shift.
A pretty fundamental one, yes, towards an integrated understanding that draws on the best of ancient wisdom and modern discovery, transcending disciplinary silos, questioning basic assumptions.
Seeing the universe not just as stuff, but as sacred.
As an interconnected, intelligent, perhaps even sacred reality. The ultimate aim being to align our lives, our societies, with the inherent harmony and intelligence that the Vedic tradition sees woven into the fabric of the cosmos.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping this up, we've journeyed through some really deep territory. Contrasting the Vedic emphasis on an unchanging conscious reality sat, Ishvara, with science's focus on the observable material world and its ongoing puzzle about ultimate origins.
We've touched on that profound sense of interconnectedness in the Vedic view, the weight of human responsibility that comes with our intelligence, and this call to understand both the physical and the conscious, matter and spirit, not as separate, but intertwined.
It definitely leaves you with a lot to think about, which brings us to our final thought for our listeners.
Yeah, maybe something to mull over. How could I really engaging with these ancient perspectives, these ideas of underlying reality, conscious origins, interconnectedness, how might that actually enrich your understanding of the universe and your own life within it?
What assumptions about reality, about who we are, might be worth, gently questioning or re-examining after hearing this?
It's an invitation, really,
Yeah.
to reflect, maybe explore these ideas further on your own, see where they take you.